name is Rebecca Parent, and I am a theater arts professional, is what I like to call myself. I do all kinds of things. I'm primarily an actor, but for the last couple of years I've been dabbling in producing and directing and writing and all that goes along with that. I've always been a girl who likes to put on a show ever since I was a kid. My grandparents still talk about puppet shows that I would direct. I would corral my cousins and we would get behind the couch and I would tell them what the story was and what their part was, and then we would put on a show. And my parents knew that they had to put me in some kind of a class when they went to a parent-teacher meeting one day. And they found out that my best friend at the time and I were reenacting Les Miserables in the schoolyard at recess for the kids. At this point, I was living in Quebec, and we were doing this all in English, and didn't matter if the kids couldn't understand, we were going to put on the show for them. So they said, okay, let's put Rebecca into voice lessons or something. And ever since, I've just been keeping on. When I got to high school, I was taking voice lessons, so I was primarily a singer. But everybody knew that I was an actress at heart, and that every time I came to musical theater, that's where my face really lit up, and they could see that I had so much more energy and livelihood. So I joined a theater troupe in Charlottetown called Triple Threats, and I was there for years. I can't even remember how long I was there, and out of that, I started doing all kinds of things. I had my first real paying theater tour when I was in grade 8, and we toured around the western end of PEI, going to kindergartens, putting on a show called Shoo Shoo with the Big Feet. And then after that, I was finding about auditions for this TV show called The Adventures of the Aftermath Crew, some voiceover, just all of these little branches outside of theater, but always coming back to musical theater and performing in the summertime. So after high school, I decided to steer more towards the singing aspect of what I had been doing over those few years, but I always made my way back to theater. A lot of times it's kind of a fluke, or it happens because you know someone. It has so much to do with the links, the connections that you make, the networking that you're doing, which I had no idea when I was in grade 8. I had no idea that as these opportunities are coming to me, it really had to do with who I knew and who I had been working with, even if it was just in a children's theater troupe. And it still applies today. So being good at what you do is key, but it only has so much effect on where your career will go. It has so much to do with making friends and just being open to all of these experiences and expressing an interest in anything. So one thing about my experiences when I was a kid was really being open to whatever was available to me. You never know what under the umbrella of theater, what will be what you wind up connecting to the most. It could be painting sets, it could be prepping wigs, it could be a specific kind of theater. You really have to be open to trying everything, including puppetry and Shakespeare and writing new pieces for yourself and little skits and comedy. You have to take on everything, and the best time to do it is at an early age, because then by the time you've hit post-secondary, that's when you kind of know, okay, I can gravitate more towards this as I am finding my own specialty under that umbrella. Even myself, I talk all the time about wanting to do wigs or wanting to do makeup backstage, but of course I always want to be on the stage more than I want to be backstage. But you never know where you might find what's going to make you happiest. My own path, pretty unconventional, I must say, and of course there's not going to be a conventional way to go about your own career. As I mentioned, I was primarily singing in high school, so after high school I went more towards the music side. So I pursued a post-secondary degree program. It was an undergrad in musical theater, but I wasn't happy there. So I actually wound up leaving and exploring what my other options were. And in the time when I was looking at what program I wanted to go to at that point, I wound up getting a job. And so I did that, and I just kept getting jobs, and I was talking to other people about going back to school eventually, and it didn't happen for me. I like to think of my own career as a chef who gets their red seal in a kitchen rather than going to a culinary program. Even working in this theater has been like school for me. I have learned so much here from the directors, from the other actors, and just from growing in the space and in the job. So my own career, as I mentioned, unconventional, and I always am thinking about going back to school. I like to think back to a moment where I was in my first professional gig, and I turned to my dressing room mate and I said, "What is your like top piece of advice for being a good actor?" And she said, "Oh, just listening." That's the thing that I always remember, is just always to listen. And that is just a morsel that it's just a soundbite that's followed me throughout my whole career, and my whole education it's just an amalgamation of sound bites from the various people that I've met throughout my life. Something that I find a lot of people who go to theater school will say is that somebody will say something to them, but they won't realize how important that lesson was until so much later in their life. So it's so important to be constantly listening. I would say listening, but in a different capacity. So it's one thing to listen to your scene partner when you're on stage, but when you're off stage, it's also important to remain humble and to listen to everyone around you, regardless of whether you at the time think that their job is not important, but as there's in the back of your mind, there's always a hierarchy of, the director. You have to be really great and attentive to the director, but it doesn't matter what the position is. You have to be listening to everybody because everybody's role is terrifically important. So staying humble, listening, and remembering that this is about play, that this is about bringing joy or about bringing energy to the people who are around you. So that, yes, you have to take yourself seriously, but you also have to remember to play. Due diligence and being open to everything under the umbrella. You, in this country and in this time, you have to be willing to create your own work. So, for example, when the opportunity arises to apply for a grant or for a commission, you have to go for it. And you have to be willing to wait as well, because sometimes, you're applying for something that's not going to happen for another year. So you have to be constantly looking and constantly have your eyes open to every opportunity, just in case. An opportunity came up to create a new work, and we had no idea. My friend and I decided that we were going to apply, but we had no idea what that was going to be. Sometimes it takes somebody saying, "Listen, we've got this funding for these projects, go and make us something." Sometimes it takes that invitation for you to get your mind rolling about what that project will be, even if you have no idea what it is when you're first starting out. So, and from that one invitation, we created this piece that we're terrifically proud of, and that we put so much work into. I wanted to stay in PEI, but I knew that the reality was that there isn't always work in the arts, especially in the wintertime, anywhere really. It doesn't matter where you are, there's just not as much work in those winter months. So that you are either needing to pursue other branches like film and TV, voiceover, or any of those production sides of theater, or you need to find a job for those winter months. So if I stayed in PEI, I probably could be constantly writing in the wintertime and thinking up new things that I can produce or that I can create. Creating your own work is key. but that's also a struggle. So sometimes you just have to pursue what your career has to offer you in other places, whether that's Halifax or whether that's Toronto or Vancouver. I'm just really lucky that I keep getting to come home in the summer. Even when I was doing this project of writing this new piece, creating this new piece, I was working another job. It's the cliche is there for a reason. You have good years and you have bad years. Not everybody is going to be able to find work and then leave a contract and say, okay, well, I'm looking forward to this next contract. That doesn't always happen. It's fantastic when it does. It doesn't always happen. So you have to be willing to say, okay, well, either I'm going to starve for the next few months, or I can buckle down and get a Joe job, as we call it, work in a store, work in a cafe, work in a bar, all of it. Just got to do it, and sometimes you're navigating the job that is paying your rent with the job that is your passion. So you wind up taking a job for specific reasons, like I know that I'm going to have my mornings free so that I can go to auditions, or I know that I might be able to run into theater people by working behind this bar in this specific theater, or just you're always working. It's a whole other set of skills that you're learning at the same time, right? When you're selling something to somebody in a store, you're acting. When you are waiting on someone, you may be absorbing their behavior and people watching. You're collecting information everywhere you go, so it's always useful. I mean, it's tiring sometimes, only because you really want to be on stage or you really want to be doing something else. But hey, there's no career I think that anybody has that doesn't have aspects of it that are a little more tedious. I know lots of people who are living in Toronto and they're buying condos, and that's not me at this point, but I look forward to it. I know that there's also the side of, there are some people who are very practical about it, and they'll say, okay, well, I'll give myself until the age of 30, and then if I haven't been able to buy myself a condo, maybe I'll decide to go down another path. And then there are those of us who just keep keeping on and are just diligent and happy, despite being perhaps still in an apartment or, not in the condo. There is a certain kind of energy, of spark that happens for me. I don't know what it's like for everybody else. There are some people who talk about that there are actors who are more about the process, and then there are actors who are more about the performance. And so that when they're in the room and they're working on their script and they're working on their scenes, they're invested as actors, and that's where the process is most interesting for them. And then there are those that are like me, who get onto the stage, and all of a sudden, just knowing that there are people watching and people who are there ready to experience the work just fills me up with sparks and bubbles, and you can't describe the high that comes with being on the stage, having the fear in the back of your mind that maybe I'm going to forget my lines, maybe I'm going to fall off the stage, maybe something's going to happen, and there's this tremendous energy that happens as soon as I'm on stage, or as soon as I'm doing something that I know I'll feel a tremendous amount of pride about afterwards. And that's where I think the key element why I keep coming back is because I continue to feel proud, and maybe that's cocky, or I don't know, but there's something about walking off stage and feeling proud about what I just did, and knowing that it was good work that makes me keep coming back for that high. I can't say that anybody has told me to reconsider my career. I've never met anyone who is quite that callous. I have encountered people who have said, oh, just what the world needs is another music teacher, oh, another actor. And I can't help but feel sorry for that person. Because sure, it may not be the most secure of jobs, and it may not be a high-powered banker position, lawyer, doctor, well-regarded career, but I am still proud of what I contribute. Because I was more focused on singing when I was in high school, I felt that was the right path for me, was to continue down the the singing route, more so towards the musical theater route, rather than pursuing more of a classical theater training, or perhaps a different musical theater program. If I could go back, now that I know about all of the specific programs more in detail, I would choose one of those. I didn't know. I didn't have much of a grasp about what made the program so different and why one would be stronger for more of a classical theater training, another one for more of a creative theater experience where they're more about creating new work, or what the best musical theater program for me might have been. I wish that I had more knowledge about the programs at that time, and I perhaps just didn't do my research enough at the time to figure out what program might have been better, or what really may have appealed to me more so than this program, which I kind of just had tunnel vision about at the time. Some of the strongest parts about me as an actor come from the fact that I didn't go to classical training, that my instincts have remained intact, and that I'm constantly learning as well. So in my case, there was nothing that anybody would have said to me that would have made me go off my track. What I would say to people who are facing negativity towards the arts from other people is that you can't be deluded into thinking that there's any security in this world. And if arts is where you want to live your life, then you will find the security and you will find the means to make your life. And you can't let another person's negativity spoil that assuredness. I have been terrifically fortunate in my career in Prince Edward Island. I started out my first professional job doing a musical theater gig, and I was playing the lead. No big deal. That doesn't last forever. Seldom do you see a show like Anne of Green Gables that will happen every year that you might be able to come back to. Oftentimes, most times, a theater will change up its season so that the next year you have no idea if you're going to have if there's going to be a part in a play for you. So I was very, very fortunate that after leaving that first professional gig, after doing it for a few years, I met someone who liked my work and was willing to keep bringing me back every year, so that the roles that I've played here are incredible. You should be so fortunate to be able to do the work that I've done in Toronto or in Halifax or in Vancouver. I mean, I played Eliza Doolittle in Pygmalion. I have played Marianne Dashwood in Sense and Sensibility. This year I'm playing Juliet. The opportunities that I've had in PEI have been amazing, and I feel like it is because PEI is so small. And not to say that because it's small that the work isn't up to par. Don't get me wrong, the work here is amazing in PEI. And to have this incredible summer repertory to come back to every year and to see all of the amazing theater that's being done here is just, it's incredible. People comment on it all the time. Say, oh my gosh, the work, the theater that's being done in PEI, it's crazy, it's fantastic. And to be able to come back is a dream come true. I always find it interesting when people say, you found success, and I go, have I? Because I am still constantly pursuing it. You never stop, you keep going. So I feel very fortunate to have come this far, and there's nothing that's going to stop me. I'm just always looking for the next thing.